Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Native Echo Podcast, where we make English simple and enjoyable. I am Harper.
And I am Julian. Hello to all of our wonderful listeners wherever you are in the world right now.
Julian, can I ask you something before we start today?
Of course, go ahead.
Have you ever walked out of a job interview and immediately thought, why did I say that?
Oh, yes. Many times.
Tell me one.
Okay, so a few years ago, I had an interview for a job I really wanted. Nice office, good salary, everything looked perfect. And at the end of the interview, the manager said, "Do you have any questions for us?" And I said, "Yes. Is the coffee free?"
You asked about the coffee.
I asked about the coffee. I was so nervous that my brain completely stopped working, and that was the first thing that came out.
What did they say?
They laughed, and then they said they would let me know. And they did not let me know.
You did not get the job.
I did not get the job. And honestly, I think about that moment at least twice a year.
I love that story. But you know what? I think almost everyone has a moment like that. A moment in an interview where you just freeze. Your brain goes quiet and something completely wrong comes out.
Or nothing comes out at all, which is somehow worse.
Yes, the silence. The long, terrible silence where the interviewer is waiting and you are just sitting there looking at them.
And you can hear the clock ticking.
Exactly. And today, that is exactly what we are talking about. Job interviews in English. Not just vocabulary, not just a list of words, but the real stuff. How to actually answer the most common interview questions. What to say, how to say it, and what to do when your brain decides to stop working at the worst possible moment.
Which happens to everyone. I want to be very clear about that. Even people who seem totally confident, even people who interview in their first language, nerves are normal.
And that is actually a good starting point, because the number one reason people struggle in interviews is not their vocabulary, it's nervousness. And nervousness in a second language is double the difficulty.
Double, because you're already thinking in two languages at the same time, and then someone asks you a question, and you have to be impressive on top of that.
Impressive. That is a good word. To impress someone means to make them think highly of you, to leave them with a positive feeling about who you are.
Like, I want to impress the interviewer. I want to show them I'm the right person for this job.
Yes, and the good news is that impressing someone in an interview is not about being perfect. It's about being clear, honest, and prepared.
Prepared. That word is everything. Being prepared means you've thought about the questions before. You've practiced your answers. You're not walking in cold.
Right, and that's what we're going to help with today. We're going to go through the most common interview questions one by one. We'll show you what a good answer sounds like, and we'll explain why certain answers work better than others.
And listeners, here's something I want you to do. As you listen, think about your own answers, even if you're not looking for a job right now, because this is actually great English practice for talking about yourself, about your experience, about your goals.
That's a really good point. Talking about yourself in English is one of the hardest things. It feels personal, it feels vulnerable, and in an interview, you're doing it in front of a stranger who's judging you.
No pressure at all.
No pressure at all. Okay, let's start with the big one, the question almost every interview begins with. Julian, do you know what it is?
Tell me about yourself.
Tell me about yourself. 4 simple words, and somehow the most terrifying sentence in the English language.
Why is it so hard? Because it sounds easy, but then you sit there and think, where do I even start? My whole life? Just my work? My hobbies? Do they want me to be serious or friendly?
Exactly. And the mistake most people make is they start from the very beginning. I was born in a small town, I went to school, I studied this, I graduated, and by the time they get to the interesting part, the interviewer is already asleep.
So what is the right way to answer it?
The right approach is to think of your answer in 3 parts: where you are now, where you came from, and why you're here, in that order.
Oh, I like that. So you start with the present, not the past.
Yes, you start with something current and relevant, something that immediately connects to the job. For example, if you're applying for a marketing position, you could say something like, "Currently, I work as a content creator, where I manage social media and write for a small online brand. Before that, I studied communication and focused a lot on writing and storytelling. I'm here today because I'm looking for a bigger challenge, and this role really caught my attention.
That's clean. It's short, it answers the question without being a 10-minute biography.
And notice it ends with a reason for being there. That's important because it shows you're interested in this specific job, not just any job.
Okay, can we try another one? What about the strengths question? What are your greatest strengths?
Yes, this one makes people uncomfortable for a different reason. It feels like you're boasting, like you're saying, let me tell you how great I am.
And in some cultures, that feels really strange. Where I grew up, saying good things about yourself openly was actually not encouraged.
Same. And I think that's why a lot of people answer this question too softly. They say things like, well, I'm kind of organized, I suppose, or I think I'm a pretty good communicator, maybe.
Maybe. That word kills your answer.
It does. When you hedge everything, when you add maybe and sort of and I think, you sound unsure of yourself. And if you're unsure of yourself, why would they be sure of you?
Hedge. What does that mean exactly?
To hedge means to soften what you say, to add uncertainty to avoid sounding too confident. And a little hedging in conversation is normal and polite. But in an interview, too much hedging makes you sound weak.
So, how do you talk about your strengths without sounding arrogant?
The trick is to connect your strength to a real example, not just I'm a good communicator, but I'm a good communicator, and in my last job, I regularly presented project updates to a team of 15 people, and we actually improved our internal feedback scores because of changes I suggested.
So you back it up, you give evidence.
Exactly. Employers don't just want to hear what you think about yourself, they want to hear proof, a real situation, a real result.
Okay, now the one everyone dreads. What is your greatest weakness?
What is your greatest weakness? The trap question.
And everyone knows the trap. You're not supposed to say something real, right? So they say things like, my biggest weakness is that I work too hard.
I work too hard, or I care too much, or I'm a perfectionist.
I'm a perfectionist. That one is everywhere.
And interviewers have heard it thousands of times. It sounds fake. It sounds rehearsed. Rehearsed means you've practiced something so many times that it no longer sounds natural or genuine.
So what do you actually say?
You say something real, but something that's not a core skill for the job. And more importantly, you say what you're doing about it.
So it's not just here's my weakness, it's here's my weakness and here's how I'm working on it.
Yes, that structure shows self-awareness. Self-awareness means you understand yourself, you know your own strengths and limitations, and you're honest about them.
For example, someone could say, I've always found it difficult to delegate. I tend to want to do everything myself to make sure it's done correctly, but I've been working on trusting my team more, and I've started using shared task tools, which has actually helped a lot.
That's a real answer. It's honest, it shows a real challenge, but it also shows maturity.
And it's not the kind of weakness that makes the interviewer think, we can't hire this person.
Exactly. There's a difference between saying, I sometimes struggle to let go of control, and I once forgot an important deadline for 3 weeks. One is a manageable weakness. The other is a red flag.
Red flag. That means something that warns you there might be a serious problem.
Yes, in an interview, a red flag is something that makes the employer think twice about hiring you.
Okay, let's pause here for a second, because listeners, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a job interview in English, or do you have one coming up soon? Tell us in the comments. Tell us what question you find the most difficult. We're going to cover more questions in a moment, and knowing yours might help you focus.
Yes, even if your interview isn't in English, practicing these answers in English is one of the best ways to get comfortable with the vocabulary, because this is exactly the kind of professional language that's hard to pick up in a classroom.
Okay, let's keep going. Next question. Why do you want to work here? Or sometimes, why do you want this job?
This question is testing something specific. It's testing whether you've done your research.
Research, meaning you looked into the company before the interview.
Yes, because there's nothing worse than interviewing someone who clearly knows nothing about the place they're applying to. It shows you don't really care. You're just sending applications everywhere and hoping something sticks.
So the wrong answer would be something like, well, I just need a job, and this one looked okay.
That's almost the worst possible answer. And yet, people give versions of that answer all the time without realizing it. They say things like, I heard it's a good company, or the salary seemed good. And those might be true, but they're not the right things to say out loud.
So, what should you actually say?
You need to show three things: that you know something about the company, that this role connects to your skills or interests, and that you're genuinely excited about the opportunity. Not just any opportunity, this one specifically.
So, you could say something like, I've been following your company for a while, and I really respect the way you approach customer service. The role itself matches what I've been building toward in my career, and I would love the chance to contribute to a team that clearly takes quality seriously.
That's clean. It's short, it answers the question without being a 10-minute biography.
And notice it ends with a reason for being there. That's important because it shows you're interested in this specific job, not just any job.
Okay, can